In this world, nothing can be said to be certain except death and taxes. Benjamin Franklin said that back in 1789, and people are still dying and paying taxes today. On this episode, we're speaking about death. Welcome to
Aprender Inglés with Reza and Craig.
Hello, my name's Craig.
And hi, my name's Reza.
And if you are a new listener to the show, you're very, very welcome. And if you've listened to us before, thanks for coming back. With over 45 years of teaching between us, Reza and I are going to help you grow your grammar, vocalize your vocabulary, and perfect your pronunciation, taking everything to the next level. How are you, Reza?
I'm alive and well, Craig.
I can see that.
How are you?
I'm in the same condition, not dead yet, thankfully. Every day is a bonus. The idea for today's podcast came from an email we received from Gustavo Gonzalo, who sent us this.
Good morning. I'm Gustavo once again. Oh, if you say that, Gustavo, you need to say it's Gustavo once again.
That's a translation from soy, isn't it?
Yeah, it's strange, isn't it? You would expect it to be you're Gustavo, but no. When you present yourself, you say, it's me, or it's Reza, or it's Gustavo once again. And again, I want to greet you, congratulate you, and thank you for your educational work.
Thank you, Gustavo.
I think that in some previous podcast, you talked about some generic ailments. That's a good word. Ailment is like disease or condition. But I would like you to take into consideration the possibility of talking more deeply about other more serious diseases. For example, cancer, heart attack, AIDS, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, ALS, depression, etc. And the vocabulary related to treatments. You could also talk about death and how it is treated differently depending on the part of the world where we are. You could talk about the differences between the Anglo-Saxon, Latin, American, or Eastern cultures. Because as someone once said, we do not have to take life so seriously. After all, we're not going to get out of it alive.
Nice.
Thank you for all. Thank you for everything, Better Gustavo. Thank you for everything and a big hug.
A big hug to you too, Gustavo. And thank you very much for sending us the email. You're right. We have spoken a little about generic ailments and diseases. Back in episode 126, we spoke about alternative medicine. So to listen to that, go to inglespodcast.com/126. We spoke about general health vocabulary way back a long time ago in episode 42. And more recently about chemists, pharmacies and drugstores back in 190. But we haven't spoken about death. So we're going to do that today. Reza, what do you think about speaking about cancer, heart attack, heart diseases, AIDS, that sort of thing? Is that something we should do?
We can do that in the future. Yeah, give us a bit of time, Gustavo. It's a good idea and we'll think about it. But for now, we're going to start with death because death, of course, as you said, is a topic which most definitely affects all of us. Not all of us, thank goodness, are going to get cancer, AIDS, Parkinson's, but we are all going to die, let's face it. So we need to know about talking about death.
Yeah, so let's look at some vocabulary. Obviously, the verb to die, D-I-E, but be careful because there's another word, die, which is D-Y-E. It's a verb and a noun, but it means teñir, or as a noun, tinte. So you can dye your hair, for example, or you can use hair dye or dye your clothes. But we're speaking about D-I-E, to die. Now, there are other ways to say to die because it sounds very final and very sudden, maybe a bit negative. What's a common phrasal verb, Reza, that we could use to say to die in a kind of nicer, softer way?
Well, there's a nice euphemism, which is to pass away. To pass away. You're no longer here. You just passed away. That's a nice way of saying it. It's a gentle euphemism.
Yeah. Or you could also say pass on. My uncle has passed on to another life, perhaps, or passed on to another world. So pass on or pass away, you could use. To be more formal, if you want to be formal about death, you could say to be deceased. Deceased. For example, my neighbour is deceased. He's passed away. He's no longer alive. So that's a more formal expression, to be deceased.
Yeah, that would be, I think, the Spanish translation of that, a good one could be fallecido.
Yes.
He is deceased, fallecido. So a formal, kind of clinical, neutral way of saying it. Not like our next one, which is to snuff it. SNUFF it. To snuff it.
That reminds me of a candle. If you have a candle, una vela, you snuff the candle with your fingers and the flame disappears. The same with life. So if you snuff it, you're no longer alive.
Craig, have you heard the next one? To croak it?
I have another slang expression, like a frog, perhaps.
So when you die, you might go, rah. Yeah.
To croak it.
That's CROAK, to croak it. Like snuff, it must go with if. You can't just say, he has snuffed. No, you have to say, he has snuffed it, or he has croaked it.
Another expression which is also slang, and be careful where you use or when you use these slang expressions like snuff it and croak it, because they can be very insensitive to people who have lost someone. So if you're not sure, use pass away or deceased. But these are, you may hear these expressions which are a lot more informal and slang. Another one is to kick the bucket. Kick the bucket. So my neighbour's kicked the bucket. He was ill for a while and now he's not with us. He's kicked the bucket.
If we wanted to be very euphemistic, or even perhaps in a religious context, you could say to meet your maker. The maker of everything is God, of course, if you believe in God. So if you meet your maker, you've died. So you've gone back to meet God where you came from originally.
And I just used two more expressions that I've thought of. I said that if you lose someone, you can say, we lost our grandmother last year, or I lost my wife 2 years ago. If you lose someone, that doesn't mean you don't know where they are. That means they've passed away. They're not with you anymore. Also, if they're not with you, that's another way to softly say that someone's dead. So, for example, my mother is no longer with us.
It's different if you lose someone temporarily. That always exists. For example, imagine I go to the reception in the shopping center and say, I've lost my wife. That doesn't mean she's died. That means she's somewhere here in the shopping center, but I can't find her. I lost my wife in the shopping center. In the context, you'll know if it's temporarily or if you've lost someone in the sense that they've died.
Yeah,
the context should make it clear.
If you say to someone, are you married? They might say, well, I was married, but I lost my wife last year.
Now, we're talking about the verb to die there. People often get the pronunciation wrong, or they simply get the vocabulary wrong between the verb and the noun. The noun is death. D-E-A-T-H. Death. What about the adjective, Craig?
So the adjective is dead. D-E-A-D. For example, he is dead, or he's a dead man. Now, be careful of the pronunciation because you've got two vowels together here. E-A, D-E-A-D. It's one vowel sound. It's not diad, it's dead. He is dead.
There's another adjective which has a different meaning. Deadly looks like an adverb, but in fact it's an adjective which ends in ly, like friendly. Deadly, D-E-A-D-L-Y. But that means causing death, or it has a metaphorical meaning of causing a big impact. I'll give you an example of each. A bite from that snake is deadly. You know, if certain snakes bite you, you die. The bite will cause death. But we also use it metaphorically. For example, Real Madrid's new player is deadly. He keeps scoring goals. Watch out for him. He's deadly. He'll destroy you if you play against him.
When someone dies, you bury them. You put them under the ground, under the earth. So, to bury someone or to be buried is the passive. Would you prefer to be buried or cremated, do you think, Reza?
Buried. I want to be buried.
Why?
I don't know. Why? You could say from a green point of view, it's using up energy to burn a body. Is it necessary to use up that energy?
No, it's not. I can see the green argument that perhaps you're giving back to nature, you're giving back to the soil and the earth. Yeah.
Yes, you've brought up the topic which we have to address then, that your body will probably eventually be consumed. It will be eaten by insects, animals will eventually eat through it, parasites. Horrible, but it's true. Mm-hmm. But hey, they've got to live as well.
That's right. Your energy gets moved or changed to other things, perhaps.
What about you? Cremated or buried?
I think probably cremated.
You don't want to be eaten.
I don't like the idea of being eaten by worms and insects. When somebody dies, it's customary in some cultures, to embalm the body. Embalm. E-M-B-A-L-M. Embalsamar.
So that L is silent, yeah? Embalm.
Embalm.
Yeah. It's like palm or half or something like that.
Exactly. Or calm.
So Craig has said that he wants to be cremated when he dies. He wants to be burnt.
Go up in smoke.
That's a good expression for a metaphor for die as well. I suppose then he wants his ashes, A-S-H-E-S, his ashes beneath it, to go into an urn, U-R-N. It's a container where you keep the ashes of a cremated person.
1 second, I thought urn was ganar.
Ah, you're right. Same pronunciation, but different spelling. E-A-R-N, earn money, or earn a reputation, ganar, but an urn, U-R-N, is the container for the ashes. Do you want your ashes to go in an urn, Craig?
I would like my ashes to be scattered. To be scattered means to be thrown around in different places, in a forest somewhere, near a tree, with a nice view, a nice view of the sea, perhaps.
Would you like us to burn, if I'm still alive, although I might go first, would you like us to burn anything with the body? For example, what about, as a symbolic gesture, burning your microphone and mixing it in with the body so you'll be an eternal podcaster?
Well, hold that thought. Hold that thought, my friend, because I'd like to speak about microphones and death later. If you are like Reza and you would prefer to be buried, you'll probably be buried in a cemetery, which is a place where people are buried. C-E-M-E-T-E-R-Y, cemetery.
And usually you first get put in a box for dead people before you get buried. That's a coffin. C-O-F-F-I-N, coffin. The place where the coffin goes in the cemetery, your specific little area, will be your grave. G-R-A-V-E, your grave, the tumba. There's actually another word, but it's less common than cemetery, which is graveyard. Mm-hmm. Grave plus yard, Y-A-R-D, is kind of like a cemetery, but I think a graveyard has to be beside a church, doesn't it?
That's what I was thinking. My understanding is a graveyard is maybe smaller than a cemetery and attached to the side of a church, perhaps, especially in a village.
So graveyard is similar to cemetery.
Of course, when you die, there's usually a funeral for family and friends, whether you're cremated or buried. And it's very similar in Spanish, funeral.
To mourn is an interesting verb. For example, I am mourning. Does that mean yo soy la mañana? No, it doesn't. And because there's different spelling. M-O-U-R-N, to mourn, or to grieve, G-R-I-E-V-E, means when you are thinking about someone who has recently died. In other words, lamentar la muerte or estar de luto. You are mourning or you are grieving. You could say that you are in mourning. And if you do that, you are a mourner. M-O-U-R-N-E-R. N-E-R. Craig, what do you think is the typical length of time to be in mourning after someone dies?
I think that's a very personal thing. Some people mourn for a month or two, but some people might mourn someone's passing for years. It might take years to get over someone's death. To get over, the phrasal verb means to recover from, to feel better after someone dies. It could be years to get over.
So here's a terrible joke. But you have to try and joke about everything in life, even death. When someone dies is the only occasion in life when you can always be in mourning. Even in the afternoon and the evening, you can still be in mourning.
That's terrible.
What a terrible joke.
So that's some vocabulary there for you about death. Let's move on to some expressions connected to death. For example, looking at dead, D-E-A-D, dead, you can be dead certain about something. For example, I think Argentina are going to win the World Cup. I'm dead certain. This means I'm absolutely certain. I'm 100% certain. I'm completely, totally certain. To be dead certain. And there are some similar expressions using dead in this meaning, Reza, aren't there?
Yes, Craig, I have a question for you. Let's see if you know the answer. What's the capital city of Canada?
Montreal.
You're dead wrong.
Toronto?
You're dead wrong. Ottawa.
Ottawa. Of course it is. Of course it is. Ottawa.
So dead wrong or dead right, the opposite. If you're dead right, that means 100% correct. Dead wrong, totally incorrect. Dead right, dead wrong.
Something can be straight, in una línea, recta. So you could say it is dead straight if it's completely straight or very straight.
Dead tired is a typical collocation as well. That doesn't mean you're so tired that you've died. No, but it does mean that you're very, very tired.
How do you feel on a Friday afternoon after class?
I feel very tired, but it's Saturday afternoon when I'm dead tired because on Saturday morning I have another class. So if you want to find me dead tired, it'll be Saturday afternoon.
But really, teaching for us is a pleasure. It's not an obligation. We love teaching. For us, teaching is not really work. It's dead easy. If something's dead easy, it's very easy.
Craig, is there any comedian or comic actor that just makes you laugh all the time?
Well, I really like Monty Python, who at the end of Life of Brian sang the song that's, for me, is dead funny. Always look on the bright side of life. So that's dead funny. If something's dead funny, it's very funny.
And of course, in that song, they start by talking about life, but they end up talking about death. And they say, always look on the bright side of death. So I'm sure many of you know that song. If you want to have a laugh listening to a funny song about death, check out the Life of Brian, always look on the bright side of life. So.
I'll put a link to it in the show notes to this episode, which is inglespodcast.com/221 if you want to watch that video of Monty Python, which is dead funny.
Craig said that he's absolutely certain that Argentina are going to win the World Cup. Some of you might be listening to this when the World Cup's already finished, so it'll be interesting to know what happens. But for him, Argentina is a dead cert. Cosa segura. He has no doubt. Argentina going to win. Dead cert. That's C-E-R-T. Cert, I suppose, coming from the word certain.
If you die suddenly, let's say you have a heart attack, or maybe you get a brain hemorrhage or something very sudden, you could drop dead. The expression to drop dead. D-R-O-P-D-E-A-D. You can also use that as a rebuff to somebody. A rebuff is something that you say to somebody to get them to go away or because you don't like what they've said. So you could say to someone, oh, drop dead, which means just go away or drop dead. So you could use it in a light sense to, if you're insulted by someone, say, oh, drop dead, go away.
Craig, if you say the line's gone dead, what are you talking about?
Well, you're trying to make a phone call, but there's no tone on the line. So the line's not open. It's impossible to make a phone call. The line's gone dead.
And if I say these batteries are dead, for example, on my smartphone, these batteries are dead.
No power. You can't use the device because there's no power in the batteries. They are dead.
Craig, do you know the expression dead in the water?
Yeah, something that's incapable of being saved or something that's completely fouled. And speaking of the World Cup, we could say that England, for the World Cup, well, they are dead in the water. They've got no chance of winning anything. So they're dead in the water.
Can you imagine a fish which is dead in the water? So you can see it there. There it is in the water, but it's not going to do anything. So it's there, but it can't. It's not doing anything. That's probably going to be the case of England in the World Cup.
Another expression with dead is deadpan. It's one word, deadpan, which is an expression on your face or the lack of an expression on your face. Expressionless. For example, some comedians tell jokes, but they're very dry. They have a very dry, plain sense of humour. So they'll tell a joke and there's no expression on their face. So you can say that they are deadpan.
There was a famous Spanish comedian years ago, Eusebio. That was it, I think. Eusebio, the Catalan. You know, the one who just said, do you know the one about blah, blah, blah? And the joke about, and he just told joke after joke after joke, and he smoked. A lot of Spanish people will know who I'm talking about. But deadpan. He never ever laughed at his own jokes. He just told one after the other, after the other, after the other. Totally deadpan. No expression.
Let's look at some idioms with the word dead or death in them. For example, you can beat a dead horse or flog a dead horse. Flog is similar to beat, golpear. So to beat a dead horse is darse cabezazos contra la pared.
In other words, you're wasting your time. Perder el tiempo could be as well. If a horse is dead and you hit it, you flog it, well, it's not going to move. It's dead. So you're wasting your time. Whatever you do, you're not going to get any result.
I tried to convince Reza to do up his flat, but it was like flogging a dead horse. No chance.
Another expression is to do something to death. For example, Reza has done Craig's supposed love of Mickey Mouse to death. He said it so many times, it's just annoying now. He's done it to death. If you do something to death, you've done it so many times that it's boring now, it's irritating, it's no longer relevant, it's just irritating, bad. Stop it.
Yeah, no? I think, Reza, you've done Mickey Mouse to death with me. You need other ideas to tease me with, to tease is burlar a alguien, so to make fun of me. You need other ideas. You've done it to death, I'm afraid. You can come back from the dead in a euphemistic way. For example, Valencia were losing 2-0 in football, but they came back from the dead in the second half to win the game 3-2. It was like they were dead in the water. There was no chance, but they came back and they won. They came back from the dead.
People are often dying to know something. For example, I'm dying to know what will happen in the final episode of my favorite TV series. I'm dying to know. I can't wait. I just want to be put out of my misery. I don't want to suffer. Please tell me what happens. I'm dying to know.
So am I. I've been watching a series called Peaky Blinders, which I recommend to you listeners because it has a variety of different accents. It's based in the north of England, but with many different accents. And I'm dying to know what happens in the last episode. It's a very, very good series. Highly recommended.
Now, very often when I eat here at Craig's house after recording a podcast, I say, this food is just superb. I've died and gone to heaven. That's not a bad thing. That expression, I've died and gone to heaven, means this is just perfect. It's fantastic. It couldn't be better. It's like being in heaven. The food is so good. I've died and gone to heaven.
Thank you for the compliment. Finally, another idiom, to be laid to rest. To be laid to rest, which really means just to be buried. So, for example, now that he's dead, Brian will be laid to rest in his hometown.
In the life of Brian, that was Jerusalem, of course. Getting back to that film about life and death.
So let's look at some different traditions connected to death. Now, in the Jewish religion, it's usually...
We're speaking about Brian again. Sorry. Was his name Brian Cohen? Wasn't that his name?
Brian Cohen, yeah. So in the Jewish religion, it's very common to bury the deceased within 24 hours. So they have very quick burials in the Jewish faith. And it's also accustomed to romper, to tear an item of clothing. So you tear or rip your shirt or blouse when a member of the family dies.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's fascinating. So it's similar to Spain, for example, where they bury people very quickly also.
Yes.
Maybe not 24 hours, but they're pretty quick in Spain as well. I do know cases of people being buried within a day or two. More than 3 days is considered long in Spain, isn't it?
It is, that's true. However, in Sweden, the Swedes have to wait the longest, or usually wait the longest. They don't have to, they choose to. An average of 20 days before Swedish people bury the body. And the law in Sweden is 1 month. So you can have a body without being buried for up to a month. I hope they embalm the body first so that it doesn't smell.
I'm not surprised, that in a country like Sweden, they're used to waiting longer before they bury the body. But in, for example, Spain or in the Jewish religion, and when I think of the Jewish religion, I think above all of Israel, they're warm countries simply because the body is going to smell, to decompose quicker, where there's sun in Israel, in Spain, in Italy. And in these countries, they tend to bury the body quick because years ago there was no refrigeration and it was horrible to keep a body. But in Sweden, it's not going to be that warm, so the body won't decompose as quick. Would you say that's probably why?
That makes a lot of sense, and that probably goes back years ago where maybe they just left the body outside in the winter, would freeze, and it wouldn't need to be buried because it wouldn't decompose. I think there's probably a lot of sense in that. Yeah. What happens in China and Taiwan when you die?
Well, you needn't worry if not that many people like you when you die in China and Taiwan, because you can pay money for professional mourners. Remember we said to mourn is to act like you miss someone. So these people don't really miss you. Echar de menos miss, but they pretend they do. They act because you've paid, someone's paid money so that they are professional mourners. Imagine that.
That's right. They're actually paid to go and wail, which is gemir or llorar. They wail, W-I-L, at your funeral to make it seem like you really, really were appreciated when you were alive.
Craig, I've always liked the look of a New Orleans death, where they have one of these jazz funerals. Have you ever seen them on TV?
Yes, I've seen them on TV. They do look quite interesting because of the fact that when the funeral starts, you've got this very sad, melancholic, slow music, which, by the way, is called a dirge, D-I-R-G-E. That's a sad funeral song or tune. So, and then it changes to dancing and the music gets faster. So first you have the sadness of somebody passing away, which then changes during the march to celebrating the person's life with happier music. I like that idea.
It's very particular just to New Orleans. Doesn't happen anywhere else in North America, just down there in Louisiana. Curious.
What might surprise you is what happens in South Korea, because they commonly cremate the remains of the deceased and then compress the bones and ashes into death beads, B-E-A-D-S. A bead is una cuenta. So beads are made from the dead body.
And what do people do with these beads?
They have them in a special jar in their house in a similar way that in the West we might have ashes in an urn. So they keep them in a revered place, a special place in the house. And the reason apparently is because space, graveyard space or cemetery space in South Korea is very, very limited. So there isn't always space to bury the deceased. And obviously a bead is very small.
Oh, I would hate that. Please don't let that happen to me. I mean, I get really claustrophobic and irritated just wearing tight clothes. The idea of being compressed into the size of a bead, for me, that sounds horrible. I don't fancy that at all.
Don't worry, I won't let anyone make you into a bead, Reza, if you go first.
I tell you what I do fancy, though. I quite like what they do in Ghana, in Africa. They have fantasy coffins that represent something you loved. So, for example, it's very typical to see a huge fish for someone who was a fisherman who's died, or a Mercedes coffin for a businessman, or a big Bible if you're religious. You can have anything you like made by these artisan coffin makers.
And do you remember I said at the beginning of the podcast I was going to speak about microphones when I die because you suggested me being cremated with my microphone? Well, why not have a coffin in the shape of a microphone and put my body inside?
Ooh, good idea.
What would you choose, a violin or a bottle of Guinness?
Can I do a 50-50 split? Two things I love in life.
Kind of funny. That would be interesting to have a coffin in the shape of something you really like and be buried in that.
I really like that idea.
There's something in Madagascar off the coast of Africa which is called the turning of the bones. The turning of the bones. What's that, Reza?
Well, it's very particular. Every 7 years, the family has a party. Yeah, a party. And they spray like a vapor. They spray the body of the deceased, the dead person, in perfume or wine, vino. Yeah. And they dance with the body.
That's just weird. That is weird. That's creepy. Creepy is the miedo.
They also talk to the body, which obviously won't be listening that much, I guess, to tell it news and remember old times. So they treat the body as if it were still alive.
That's creepy.
I don't like the sound of that. Dancing with a dead body. Oh, no. What if? No. What if you damaged the body or something? What if you turned a bit too quick and
the head fell off?
Your head fell off. You broke a finger or something. Oh dear.
Hindus, on the other hand, they do not touch the dead body at all because they consider it impure, that it's not a pure thing. And they put a drop of water, drop is una gota, a drop of water from the holy Ganges river, and they put that in the dying person's mouth. Now, all Hindus, except babies, children, and saints, santos, are cremated. But you knew that, right?
I didn't know about the saints. Yeah, but I guess that makes sense, yeah, as a way of revering them, of showing reverence. They keep the body. Maybe they embalm it or something like that.
When I was in India, I actually saw cremations on the banks of the Ganges in a place called Varanasi, which is a holy city. It's quite amazing to see these funeral pyres. A funeral pyre, Pyre, is usually a mountain of wood with the body on top, which is then burned in a religious ceremony.
Mm-hmm. I've heard that Varanasi, which is also called Benares, is a spectacular place to see that. It's famous for that ceremony, yeah?
It is.
To see that. And Craig, you know what they used to do in the past, but now it's illegal with the widow. That's la viuda, the woman of a man who had died. What happened with them in India in the past?
Did they used to cremate her with her husband?
Indeed, they
on
did.
The funeral pyre?
Alive. They burnt her alive, which of course is horrible. But that was the ancient tradition. So when a woman's husband died many years ago, I don't know exactly when it stopped, but they used to burn the widow with the body of her now dead husband.
That's horrific.
Sounds horrible. It's illegal now, but it used to happen.
Let me see what you think of this one, Reza. In Mongolia and Tibet, there's something called a sky burial. A sky burial. It is connected to the Buddhist religion. So the Buddhists in Mongolia and Tibet believe that the soul, l'alma, and the spirit moves on after death. And the body is just empty. It's an empty thing, an empty vessel. So to return the body to the earth, the body is chopped into pieces, cut up, and placed on a mountaintop, which exposes it to the elements, including vultures. So
what are vultures?
Vultures are big birds of prey. In Spanish, buitres.
Yeah. So these birds that eat dead animals.
Yeah. Yes, the birds that eat dead animals, buitres, I think in Spanish, vultures. So what do you think? I mean, to me, it makes sense because they say ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Dust is polvo. We return to the place we came from. Doesn't it make sense to just leave the body to nature and let nature eat it?
It does make sense in a way, but you could argue that the cutting up of the body, that isn't natural. That's human intervention. So I'm not sure. I can't quite decide about that one. Do you like the idea?
I wouldn't like it for me, but I can understand where it's from. I don't see much difference to putting a body in a coffin and burying it in a cemetery. The result is the same. The cultures are different.
Craig, I believe they do perhaps an even stranger thing in the Philippines. What do they do there?
Oh, it's really weird, really strange in the Philippines. The Benguet of northwestern Philippines blindfold their dead. Now, blindfold is vender los ojos. They put a blindfold on their deceased and put them next to the main entrance of the house. So they just put them there. As you go in, you see the deceased person.
Wow.
And the Tinguian neighbours dress the bodies in their best clothes, put them on a chair, and they put a lit cigarette in their lips, which is a bit disgusting to me. The Caviteño, who live near Manila in the Philippines, bury their dead in a hollowed out tree trunk. Trunk is tronco, and to hollow out the trunk of the tree is to make it empty. So they bury their dead inside the tree. And the Apayo, who live in the north of the country, bury their dead under the kitchen.
Why the kitchen?
I don't know. So you're making your tea with your biscuits and there's Uncle Sam sitting there in the kitchen under the floor.
I really don't like, purely from the point of view of hygiene, higiene. Oh, that sounds awful, I must say.
And the thought of having a dead member of the family under the kitchen would not be a comfortable one for me. Wouldn't like that at all. What do Muslims do?
Muslims are always buried, not cremated if they're religious, facing the city of Mecca in Saudi Arabia, because it's the holiest city in Islam. It's very significant in the religion. So wherever the cemetery may be in the world, the body should be positioned in the coffin so that the face is looking towards Mecca.
So I'm assuming the head is pointing in the direction of Mecca and the feet are pointing away from it.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. We also know in Mexico there are long traditions, famous traditions of celebrating death. That's called the Day of the Dead, El Día de los Muertos. What do you think happens in that ceremony, or should we ask our Mexican listeners to tell us?
I don't know. I'd like some details from our Mexican listeners. Tell us about what happens on your Day of the Dead, beg your pardon. Día de los Muertos, isn't it? Yeah?
Yep.
Yeah, the Day of the Dead. Give us some feedback. Get in touch with us, please. Craig, how can they get in touch?
You can send us a voice message using our SpeakPipe service, which is at speakpipe.com/inglespodcast. Or if you prefer, just record an MP3 file with your microphone, attach it to an email, and send it off to us at craig@inglespodcast.com. That's to me.
Or to me at belfastreza@gmail.com.
So let us know what you think. Do you have any particular customs in your country, wherever you're listening, in Latin America or all around the world? And how would you like to be buried or remembered at your funeral? We would like to hear from you, so please get in touch. Before we go, we'd love to thank our wonderful sponsors, starting with Bruno, our gold sponsor on Patreon, who offers walking tours of Copenhagen through his company CopenhagenWalkingTour.com. Now, if you're going to Copenhagen and you're interested in seeing the city and having an experienced English-speaking or Spanish-speaking guide, then why not get in touch with Bruno, who offers castle tours of the city, walking tours around Copenhagen, and these tours come very well recommended. Also, if you're going to Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, Bruno offers tours led by local guides only of the favela area in Rio. Now, it's very safe, and the money that you contribute to the tour partly goes to help the community and give back to them to improve their daily needs. Go to Bruno's websites to find out more information, CopenhagenWalkingTour.com for Copenhagen and favelawalkingtour.com.br for Rio de Janeiro. Thank you to all our wonderful patrons who are supporting the podcast. Reza, who are they?
Ana Giovanna, Dana Constantin, Pachi Ibañez, Manuel Tarazona, Juan Carlos Rodado, Maite Palacín Pérez, Lara Arlem, Néstor from Luces Extrañas, María Gervati, Lorena, Sara Jarabo, Carlos Garrido, Mamen, Juan Leva Galera, Corey Finneran from the ivenvy.com podcast, Miren Full, Jose Luis Arregui, Agus Paulucci, Mariel Riedemann, Manuel García Betagon, Raúl López, Rafael, José Manuel Fernández Picazo, Pilar Martínez, Gambati Blog, Igor Garmendia, Ignacio Espona, Kieran, Ana Ibarra, Marina Artiz Pena, Juan Carlos Pantín Fernández, Alejandro Pluma, Alex Cuadra, José Emilio Villena, Esperanza Colmenero, Emilio Manuel Martínez Ribas, Chema Santa Cruz, Ana Fernández Monterrubio, Carlos Cano Domingo, Gustavo, Antonio Díaz, José Antonio Muñoz, Eva María Elizalde Martínez, Arminda Fafo, Carlos Sánchez, Elvira Cortés, Francisco Javier Alejandra y Sebastián, Andrea Mío, Rogelio Menéndez, Antonio Lafuente, Eloy, Pablo Martínez, Miguel, Javier Correa Zambade, Alejandro Martínez, and Alejandro Ventura. And our latest patrons are Isabel Armada and Mar Harmoni.
Thank you to all of those wonderful people for continuing to support the podcast and transcriptions for our podcast. You can join our Patreon program for as little as $1 per month, and by doing so, you get instant access to recent transcriptions lovingly transcribed by Angelica Bello from Madrid. If you would like to join that lovely list, go to patreon.com/inglespodcast. Thank you also to Patricia Alonso, who continues working hard transcribing episodes for you. And we now have episodes 1 to 22 and 131 to 142. Of course, not only Patricia, but there have been others who have helped us in the past, like Arminda from Madrid. Thank you very much. Alberto from Granada. Thank you. We really appreciate your time. Until next week, thank you very much for listening. It's goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.
The music in this podcast is by Pitts. The track is called See You Later.